In this world, everyone is a cell in the human body, trying to survive after an apocalyptic infection. Among millions of red blood cells, Ryan is a rookie. He always dreams of a perfect life until the host body gets infected. As he continues to struggle for survival, he meets the most fiery white blood cell in the body. She is responsible for eliminating deadly viruses. On the first day, Ryan learns that his life's mission is to deliver oxygen to all parts of the body through a pathway called the bloodstream. After studying all the pathways, the class of cells is divided into groups. They are sent to different stations. When his group arrives late at the station, they start getting scolded by the team leader. He hates guiding these clueless rookies. As punishment, he orders each to carry 2 boxes of oxygen. He warns that with the current health crisis in this body, their life as red blood cells will be extremely miserable. As soon as the main artery valve opens, the red blood cells rush in. They push heavy carts full of oxygen along the way. After Ryan gets lost on his way to the stomach cell leader is extremely annoyed with him. It's only the first day, and he's already late. They cannot afford any mistakes because this body is no longer healthy. Years of hard study and work, combined with lack of sleep from staying up late playing League of Legends, and drinking How noodles every day, have left this body beyond saving. While collecting boxes for another transport, Ryan meets a veteran red blood cell. He tries to help Ryan deliver oxygen to the brain. On their way through the bloodstream, they find it clogged with a brown, slimy substance called cholesterol. Roger identifies the culprits he calls LD, a gang from the liver that occasionally uses the bloodstream as their dumping ground. He tries to chase them, but the LD gang immediately runs away when they see him. Roger worries that if this continues, the host will eventually have a heart attack, just as Ryan completes his first transport. Roger tells him to rest, but when the team leader sees Ryan being lazy, the young man gets angry. He tells Ryan to get back to work. Suddenly, a vent explodes right in front of them, releasing carbon monoxide into the bloodstream. The team leader gets caught in the gas explosion, and his body starts reacting negatively to the smoke. But when Ryan tries to rush to save him, Roger stops him from getting any closer. He says this is karma. He explains that the team leader and other red blood cells exposed to this toxic gas will turn into zombie cells. Furthermore, a devastating group of bacteria, appearing from nowhere, began to devour zombies. As the bacteria lunged towards Ryan and Roger, Lesia, the mlem white blood cell, appeared. She slashed through all the bacteria with her sword. Ryan was stunned when he first saw a white blood cell lady and her 2 cannons, larger than his head. The white blood cell lady began to fight the remaining bacteria, while Roger mourned the loss of his friend. Ryan intended to step forward to console his brother. However, Roger reminded him that the sole purpose of red blood cells like them was to deliver oxygen at any cost. Regardless of the consequences, he had sacrificed himself by descending into the contaminated part of the bloodstream to deliver oxygen to the brain. Ryan delved deeper into despair after losing his only mentor. He considered ending it all, but Lesia stopped him. Together, they went to the lungs and expelled gaseous waste. There, they discovered that the host body's smoking was the cause of carbon monoxide poisoning. Ryan wondered why the host would self-destruct in such a way. But Lesia revealed that from here on, things would only get worse. On the way back, he saw a pretty macrophage girl wearing a pink dress. However, the color beneath was soaked in the blood of the bacteria she had just chopped up. She silently passed by him to pursue a foreign object. Ryan's hand brushed against the handle of his cart, and the sound provoked the macrophage. She immediately swung her cleaver at his neck. However, upon realizing he was not a bacterium, she removed the knife and apologized for almost beheading the young man. The hidden pain in her smile made him realize that recently, not only the red blood cells were stressed. Every other cell in the body was also struggling to breathe. At the mouth cavity, Ryan brought an oxygen tank and discovered that the mucosal cells were burning after an outbreak called mouth ulcers. He rushed towards a collapsed cell, hoping to get a receipt stamped. But an explosion from the wall of the cavity knocked him to the ground, and the flames from the ulcer incinerated his receipt. Due to the mouth ulcer bursting, many dreadful bacteria began to invade the mouth cavity. They approached Ryan, and he cringed in fear as they prepared to finish him off. Then Lesia, along with 2 other white blood cells, annihilated them all and saved his life. They minced the bacteria and consumed them using a special technique called phagocytosis. After completing the mouthwash, a special liquid flooded the oral cavity, helping to wash away the remaining dead bacteria and restore them to normal. Lesia praised Ryan for not flinching during the reprimand, and then she left with the white blood cells. Back in Ryan's bloodstream, other recruits began to complain to each other. 2 senior red blood cells stepped forward, hoping to boost the morale of the young ones, but the alcohol-laced drinking fountains started pouring into their veins, and an experienced red blood cell advised them to relax. They followed the senior to the largest agency in the body, the liver. He took them to a restaurant where they could unwind by socializing with the lovely liver cells. Ultimately, it was a gathering of phagocytes in the cellular world. They offered the recruits a special drink called ADH, which reduced stress by neutralizing the effects of apple cider vinegar. Initially, Ryan only wanted to drink alcohol, but the liver cells persuaded him, and he ended up downing a glass of ADH. The ADH took effect, affecting other red blood cells, and a dark smoke emanated from them. Suddenly, Ryan lost his temper when he saw the remaining workers being lazy. In front of Lesia, the liver cell, the senior red blood cell scolded Ryan, revealing that everyone here was indifferent because he was the host carrier, not the hero himself. After a few hours, Ryan apologized to the liver cells for his behavior. Following a relaxing night, the last batch of red blood cells was ready to resume their duties. However, they were missing one cell because the old man had given up on a liver cell the day before. He was taken to a special part of the body called the sinus oi, where a unique type of Kupfer cell swallowed his soulless body to release nutrients back into the system. Ryan cried when he lost two mentors in quick succession. Before leaving, the liver cell kissed his forehead, but Lesia unexpectedly appeared, pulling him away. Although he wanted to explain, she warned him not to be naive and give his heart to the phagocytes. Meanwhile, in the brain, the central nerve cells were urging others to prepare for stimulation. Others worried about the risks of abandoning this body. However, the commander asserted that they had no other choice. Throughout the entire body, a message began to circulate, demanding that all cells abandon their tasks to fulfill this crucial mission. Everyone gathered at the designated location to hear the announcement about the mission. The main brain cell explained that their task was to transport oxygen to the lower region. This would allow the host organism to sublime. Ryan said that he had only delivered oxygen to the head before. He had never gone down there before. After uttering these words, two young red blood cells began to tease Ryan. They blocked his path and mocked him for being inexperienced. They laughed because he had never had the chance to go down there. However, Lesia suddenly appeared. As the two were about to mock her, she launched a sword at them. She actually intended to kill a tiny insect blocking the way. But the young man was so scared that he wet his pants. After Ryan expressed his gratitude, they invited him to patrol with them to the testicles. They were carrying out the transport mission together. They arrived at the testicles. There, the Sertoli cells were tasked with nurturing and caring for the sperm. Ryan was amazed that this tiny sperm cell was the foundation for creating all other cells in the body. This realization made him even more excited to participate in the process of sublimation. He joined the other red blood cells. Together, they waited for the signal to begin their role. The signal was given, and the red blood cells began to expand the Holoshan arteries. This increased the blood flow for the young host to work. Then, they moved to the spongy tissue and began to fill it up. They compacted it into a hard tissue. The brain cells monitored the process. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. However, the necessary golden compound to maintain the sublimation process began to decline in the body. Within seconds, the entire operation was compromised. The red blood cells were injured in the process. The spongy tissue became too tight, and they could not fill it up. They lost all hope in the mission, and their superiors advised them to run before things got worse. However, Ryan was determined not to give up without a fight, especially for the tiny sperm cells. He stayed behind and tried to return to the soft tissue. At the headquarters of the brain cells, the chief commander had a resolute expression when considering the mission's termination. But before he could issue the order, the body began producing more gold compounds, and the red blood cells gathered to assist the host in completing the task. Ryan and the other red blood cells successfully finished their part, and the sperm cell pilots prepared for takeoff to another host. Strategic measures were put in place to ensure the safe delivery of sperm cells, and the countdown process began. Then, the sperm cells were launched into space to create life on the moon. The rookie red blood cells were exhausted after the demanding event, but they finally graduated and became fully functional cells. Ryan was particularly excited about the idea of sperm cells creating life on the moon. He asked his superiors about the possibility of landing there. However, they informed him that not every ascension process aimed to create new life, sometimes it was just temporary entertainment, and they couldn't always distinguish between the two. The exhausting and dangerous work they did was merely cheap entertainment for the host, leaving Ryan feeling deflated. He wondered what purpose he was born for. However, his thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Lesia, who brought bad news about their safety. Due to their weakened immune system, the ascension process had created conditions for a deadly group of bacteria named chlamydia to invade. Lesia instructed Ryan and the other red blood cells to find a safer place, while she and the white blood cells would combat HPV in the urinary tract. A lonely young man had been eyeing the little white blood cell girl, wanting to smoke her in front of him. However, she refused to yield to this mysterious character, but the young man used force to strangle her with a cigarette. In the city, Ryan did his best to assure the other cells that everything was still under control, but the infamous syphilis had them worried about their lives. Back in the urethra, Lesia and the other white blood cells were fighting the monsters. However, they were quickly overwhelmed by their numbers. Lesia saw their forces falling like dominoes, and she ordered the remaining white blood cells to retreat. The news of their humiliating defeat reached the ears of the white blood cell general. She immediately declared war on the HPV cells. All available white blood cells were summoned to a temporary military base called the lymph node. They were to receive instructions on the next move. As Lesia and the other white blood cells approached the lymph node, they were blocked by a group of impatient red blood cells. They accused the white blood cells of being lazy. Their words affected Lesia's mood, but she did not let emotions control her. She politely assured the red blood cells that the situation was being handled. At the lymph node, the general instructed the white blood cells to show no mercy. This was to ensure the complete eradication of the gonorrhea from the body. Lesia, the captain of the white blood cells, led her troops back to the battlefield. She spoke to the white blood cells, clarifying that the battle ahead might end in defeat. Nevertheless, she encouraged them to continue fighting. That was their sole purpose as white blood cells. Ryan was tasked with delivering oxygen to the urethra. Unlike the other red blood cells exhausted by gonorrhea, he rose to the occasion. He was accompanied by another red blood cell, Jim. On their way to the urethra, Ryan and Jim saw many white blood cells scattered in a pool of mucus. After contracting gonorrhea, they were ambushed by jaundice cells. But a white blood cell emerged from behind. They used their last bit of strength to destroy the bacteria. A macrophage picked up the white blood cell, and she warned Ryan and Jim about the dangers ahead. Lesia and the other white blood cells fought valiantly against gonorrhea. However, their efforts were in vain as the bacterial army continued to multiply at an astonishing rate. Lesia tried to strike, but the impact on the bacteria's armor caused her sword to break in half. She continued to fight, but soon more than half of her forces were captured. The leader of the gonorrhea struck Lesia. Although she had dated him, she became enraged and stabbed the monster in the head. Ryan and Jim finally arrived at the scene. Ryan watched in despair as Lesia and the other white blood cells were tortured by the enemy. Lesia advised him to run away, but Ryan stood firm and challenged them. At that moment, Ryan activated his chakra like Naruto, and a brilliant light fell from the sky, stripping away the flu's armor. They were at a disadvantage, and the white blood cells took the opportunity to annihilate them. Shortly after, the battle ended, and gonorrhea was no more. Unfortunately, the commander and a few other white blood cells died on the battlefield and were buried with honors. At the thymus, the T helper cells were angry at the casualties suffered in the fight against gonorrhea. They considered white blood cells weak and were determined to bring about a new era. A T-cell dictatorship for the entire body, despite the T helper cell's best efforts. But he himself did not have much strength, so he summoned an army of robust soldiers known as killer T-cells and began to implement the plan of the killer T-cells flooding into the body. They all looked like WWE wrestlers. While delivering oxygen to the hair roots, Ryan caught a glimpse of the steps in the host's hair production and maintenance process. He met the hair cells, a group of rapidly dividing cells tasked with creating and nurturing each hair strand, including the pigment cells ensuring the hair retained its black color. Returning to the city, he coincidentally met Lesia, who was still recovering from the events of the previous battle. She told him that she was still haunted by that battle but thanked him for helping her. The color on Ryan's face shifted to match the uniform. He assured Lesia that he would always be by her side, no matter what. However, the killer T-cells arrived, and a young man named Brick among them had secretly admired Lesia for a long time. Ryan felt angry when he saw Lesia cozying up to Ryan instead of him. In frustration, he warned her not to interfere with the T-cells' work and stormed off with his team. Back in the immune system, the helper T-cells were under immense stress, striving to keep the body infection-free. Despite advice from colleagues to rest, Ryan wanted the entire body to recognize the importance of T-cells. Meanwhile, in the bloodstream, Ryan and Jim struggled to supply oxygen to the hair follicles due to severe cholesterol blockage. Luckily, they found a narrow pathway and used it as an alternative route to reach the hair follicles. Upon arrival, they were horrified to find the area ablaze due to an attack by the killer T-cells. The accumulated stress had made them aggressive, and they began attacking hair cells. The T-cell commander, sleep-deprived and frantic, mistook hair cells for dangerous cancer cells. Despite the hair cells' attempts to correct the misunderstanding, the helper T-cells were too distracted. The killer T-cells continued their rampage, causing many hair strands to fall out, leaving the host body bald. To make matters worse, the helper T-cells decided to increase their aggression by using a special energy-boosting fluid called cytokine to stimulate the killer T-cells. At the same time, Brick and other killer T-cells transformed into a super scion-like state, determined to eliminate the hair cells. Meanwhile, Ryan became increasingly concerned about the host's social life and encouraged other red blood cells to supply oxygen to protect the remaining hair. All hope seemed lost until a futuristic robot group called Steroid arrived to save the day. Using advanced laser technology, Steroid swiftly neutralized the killer T-cells and helper T-cells. Brick began to smear tomato sauce all over his face. Yet, he still tried to escape from Steroid to continue attacking the hair cells. However, Ryan finally cleared things up for the young man. He became more alert after the impact of cytokine. Brick immediately regretted his actions and surrendered to the Steroid robots. On their way, Ryan and Jim slipped on some slimy liquid. It ruined their uniforms. Therefore, they decided to stop at the kidney bathhouse to clean up. They operated under the strict control of the platelet chief. She had a strict rule of no talking for all workers. The waste created by all the blood cells visiting the bathhouse would form the host's urine. Ryan saw the kidney cells bearing a heavy workload. He talked with a girl named Yumi. She opened up to him about how the host's bad eating and drinking habits affected their ability to keep the blood vessels clean. Ryan thought this was the reason he and Jim had fallen into the slime earlier. Earlier, on their way back, Ryan and Jim heard an unusual sound from behind the urinary tract wall. To their surprise, a giant crystal had pierced through the wall. They quickly ran away while trying to warn others on their path. However, the crystal tore deeper into the wall. Air from outside drew many red blood cells and urine, turning the urine red. After all the chaos, a laser endoscope from outside the body moved in and crushed the crystal into pieces. However, this created an opportunity for a new group of bacteria to crawl in and invade the body. The white blood cells stepped in to prevent the bacteria from entering the kidney. Meanwhile, Ryan and Jim ran to warn the kidney cells about the impending crisis. The white blood cells attacked the bacteria with full force, but they were easily overwhelmed by the numbers. At the command center, the main brain cell realized their dire situation and ordered other brain cells to mobilize macrophages to strengthen the defense. However, the macrophages, resembling delicate princesses, disliked sweating and thus couldn't accomplish much. Despite their larger numbers, the white blood cells persevered in their battle against bacteria. Nevertheless, the bacteria had subdued them, causing many to be swept into the sewer. At the same time, Ryan reached the kidney and urgently requested the renal cells to evacuate before the bacteria appeared. The tiny kidney cells trembled in fear upon hearing Ryan's warning, but they began to scatter. However, the old lady insisted they ignore Ryan and return to work. Yumi, with unwavering courage, approached her superiors, pleading with the old lady to reconsider. But before she could finish speaking, a colossal bacterium emerged from the pipeline, launching an ambush. The bacterium lunged toward Yumi, but the old lady intercepted the attack, sacrificing herself. During this intense struggle, Lesia swiftly stepped in, slicing the giant bacterium into smaller pieces, but casualties had already occurred. Yumi and the other kidney cells gathered around the old lady, who urged them to continue fighting before taking her last breath. The bacteria successfully cornered the remaining white blood cells, and the invasion of the kidney was imminent. However, a lone bacterial detective named Queen arrived to rescue them, eliminating all the bacteria. As the old lady departed, Yumi stepped up as the new leader of the kidney cells. Therefore, Ryan advised her to lead with her heart. After Jim completed his day's transport duties, he felt exhausted and decided to rest. However, before he could relax, a recently transported cell rushed out, desperately seeking help. A young man blamed Jim for providing impure oxygen, turning him into a feeble, limping old man. Following the incident, Jim faced a stern lecture from a group of cells due to his reckless behavior. However, Ryan intervened. He tried to explain why oxygen can become toxic. It's simply a matter of moving in poor-quality boxes over time. At the award ceremony, rookie Ryan was announced as the best rookie of the year. Jim kept recalling the times he chickened out and quit. After the ceremony, Jim joined a group of red blood cells as bitter as he was. They told him they thought the event was terrible. They invited him to a secret location to relax, but he declined because he was in a bad mood. As Ryan and Jim set off for the sebaceous gland, Jim couldn't help feeling jealous of Ryan's achievements in the hair department. Ryan empathized with the hair cells that were disappointed because the hair couldn't grow after the balding incident. As they climbed the stairs to the sebaceous gland, Ryan offered to carry some of Jim's boxes, but he insisted he could handle it himself. He was tired of Ryan's fake cordial attitude. On the way, an oxygen tank suddenly exploded into impure oxygen, killing many red blood cells. When they reached their destination, Ryan and Jim met the sebaceous cell. He was only minutes away from retirement. He thanked the red blood cells for their continuous hard work but downplayed his own role as an important cell in the body. He revealed that his fate as a sebaceous cell was to burst, releasing natural lubricant around the host body to prevent it from drying out. Jim and Ryan were horrified by the great sacrifice he had to make for the body's health. Despite this, the sebaceous cell accepted his fate and politely asked them to step outside as he prepared to reincarnate in another world as a heroic sebaceous cell, exploding and releasing the lubricant just as he said. However, the lubricant reacted with a few oxygen tanks in the room, turning them into impure oxygen. The impure oxygen had a strong smell, activating the red blood cells and hair cells. Jim blamed himself for the accident, believing he had been cursed for always providing impure oxygen. He tried to keep his distance from others, but 2 red blood cells from the ceremony caught up with him, and they invited him to their secret location to gain more strength. Jim followed them to the small intestine, where a kind of elixir poured over him, transforming him into a super transport machine. Jim had unstoppable strength, carrying oxygen boxes throughout the body tirelessly. Whenever he was exhausted, he quickly recharged by bathing in the elixir. Ryan tried to tell Jim that relying too much on the elixir would gradually deplete his energy. But Jim preferred a moment of glory, even if it meant fading away quickly, rather than a dim existence over 100 years. The stressful nature of their job required them to boost their energy. However, during a routine cell production shift, a capillary in the nasal cavity burst, creating a deep hole that began to swallow everything and every cell in its path. Ryan and Jim struggled to survive, but the consequences of the elixir left Jim too weak to continue. Feeling defeated and worthless, Jim gave up and was ready to let go. Ryan quickly reminded him that everyone deserves a second chance and encouraged him to keep living. Determined to survive, Jim used his last bit of strength to rush towards Ryan. He immediately pulled him to safety. After surviving a near-death experience, a bond of camaraderie formed between Ryan and Jim, and they were happy to be alive together. As the levels of carbon monoxide and alcohol rose in the bloodstream, the red blood cells were too exhausted to function. A veteran red blood cell urged Ryan and Jim to accompany him to the liver for detoxification. Upon reaching the liver, they were shocked to see the once vibrant and cheerful organ had turned into a desolate, cold, and dusty wasteland. The head liver cell welcomed them at the dining table and apologized for being unable to support their detoxification process. She warned them to be careful when supplying oxygen to the legs because the host's indulgent drinking had awakened the Dark Lord. Despite this, Ryan and Jim continued forward to supply oxygen to the legs, but they struggled to climb as the leg muscles could not generate enough pressure to push them along the way. They rested for a minute before continuing their journey, but 2 veteran red blood cells, Jeff and Stan, arrived to mock them for their unnecessary diligence. Jim walked away quietly, but Jeff and Stan kept reminding him of the times they bathed together in caffeine. However, Ryan quickly intervened and told them to leave Jim alone. As Ryan and Jim continued their journey on the ground, suddenly the earth cracked open, and a rookie red blood cell fell into the pit. Ryan and Jim rushed to the scene. To their surprise, they saw a massive blood clot containing hundreds of dead red blood cells. Stan sneaked up behind Ryan and kicked him into the pit, but Jim quickly caught him and clung to the edge. Jeff and Stan warned both of them never to challenge their seniors again and allowed them to gradually descend into the pit. Jim couldn't hold on any longer and was about to let go when Lesia arrived just in time to rescue them. Ryan thanked Lesia and sat down to catch his breath. Admiring Lesia's 2 formidable white blood cell bullets, she escorted them out of the pit and led them down an alternative path to escape the leg. Suddenly, the ground began to violently tremble. The Dark Lord had summoned a powerful gust of wind, dislodging the blood clot and sending it hurtling toward them. They immediately took cover inside a narrow capillary to avoid being crushed. Lesia explained that the blood clot could cause serious damage if it got stuck in a vital organ. The blood clot continued rolling, carried along by other red blood cells, until it collided with the entrance to the lungs and came to a halt. Ryan and Jim struggled to find a way to remove it. They discovered that Jeff and Stan were trapped inside the clot. Their bodies were battered from the impact. Stan, laughing like a madman, warned that the Dark Lord was on his way, and everyone would pay the price. This situation severely harmed the lung cells, leaving them congested and unconscious. At that moment, Ryan remembered a secret passage he had noted earlier. Through that hidden route, he and the other red blood cells could infiltrate the blood clot from within and extract it. He led them there, and everyone squeezed through the narrow pathway to provide as much oxygen as possible. After a while, Lesia and the other red blood cells noticed that the blood clot had started to break apart. This meant that Ryan and the others had succeeded. They entered the lungs and were surprised to see that the lung cells were still alive. This was thanks to the last-minute transfer by Ryan and his team. Lesia praised the young heroes who saved the host's body. She shook Ryan's hand warmly to show her gratitude. However, the horror of the Dark Lord was far from over. A few days later, Lesia was horrified to discover that all the other white blood cells had suddenly disappeared. Ryan and his superior went to the site of sublimation to provide the host's oxygen. Ryan said it had been a long time since they last performed this process. His superior explained that the channels containing the essence of the host were closing over time. After checking the testicles, Ryan observed that all the space for the sperm cells was empty. Ryan met the person in charge of the cells there. She explained that the host's unhealthy habits had affected the production of sperm cells. This meant that the sperm cells could no longer descend to the moon to create new life there. Ryan was horrified to hear this, but he still had to continue his morning transport process. Jim caught up with Ryan and asked why he looked so down. Ryan revealed that he was worried about how the body would cope as all the cells inside continued to decrease. Lesia suddenly appeared from the shaft above and asked if they had seen any other white blood cells recently. They said no, and she immediately knew something was wrong. She explained to them that due to the recent increase in infections, many white blood cells had died in battle, leaving the body damaged. She told them to be careful while transporting and to continue searching. In the lungs, Ryan and Jim observed a group of new recruits learning their red blood cell duties. 2 recruits, Seth and Kuan, spotted Ryan from afar and rushed to greet the famous hero. Seth was thrilled to finally meet Ryan and asked for his autograph. Instead, Ryan shook his hand warmly. The supervisor noticed how much the new recruits admired Ryan and suggested that he become their mentor. Since this was Ryan's first time mentoring, he was determined to set a good example for his younger colleagues. Even when they struggled to lift heavy boxes, he still offered to share the burden with them. Back in the city, Ryan continued to assist by handling all the transportation tasks for the new recruits. However, the pressure was taking a toll on him. The recruits were exhausted after their initial transport, yet they were surprised to see Ryan standing strong despite working continuously. Unfortunately, Kuan accidentally left behind a receipt during a delivery, prompting Ryan to replace it with an oxygen tank. Seeing the workload he had to shoulder, Jim worried that Ryan was pushing himself too hard and reminded him of the fate suffered by previous mentors. However, Ryan expressed his desire to make a difference by treating the new recruits better. Beneath Ryan and Jim's feet, they were horrified to find the area filthy and worn out. From below ground, a group of tapeworms intended to turn them into food, but Lesia appeared, wielding a sword to fend off the worms. Despite her efforts, their sheer numbers overwhelmed her. 2 of Lesia's protégés joined the fight, but the worms still outnumbered them. Just as the white blood cells were about to be devoured, water suddenly flooded in from all sides, washing away the worms. Next, 3 laser beams from outside the host's body targeted the leg, incinerating the worms into ashes. Lesia and the others gasped for air as they were pinned against the wall. The Central Command quickly instructed them to face more skin fungi in other parts of the body. Ryan decided to step up and provide extra oxygen, but he quickly grew exhausted. In frustration, he vented his anger at Seth. Jim intervened, leading Ryan to a secret hiding place. Jim explained to Ryan that excessive passion for work could have negative health effects. Looking toward the sky, Ryan realized that the burden of the cellular world was too great for him to bear alone. He had a duty to save the host. However, he also recognized the need for occasional rest and relaxation. The next morning, Ryan returned to work in much better spirits. He apologized to Seth for his outburst the previous day. A senior red blood cell alerted them to an emergency in the stomach, where additional helper cells were urgently needed to supply more oxygen. Therefore, Ryan and Jim went straight ahead and left the rookies behind. In the stomach, the chief stomach cell revealed to the red blood cells how dangerous their mission was. He explained that the stomach lining had been punctured. Their job was to ensure it received enough oxygen. They also had to supply oxygen to the stomach cells for repair. Jim wondered whether to believe the chief stomach cell's words. But Ryan assured him that it was not a lie. They had prepared themselves for the worst case. Suddenly, the stomach dome cracked. Deadly hot stomach acid poured over the 2 red blood cells. The chief stomach cell arrived immediately to rescue them. However, the acid had caused severe damage. They were burned beyond recovery. Seeing this, Jim felt worried about his own safety and cowardly ran away. The stomach lining continued to crumble under the heat of the stomach acid. The chief stomach cell feared that this enemy might be stronger than they had imagined. Despite this, the red blood cells continued to move forward and supply oxygen to the stomach. Jim overcame his fear and returned to the stomach to support the remaining red blood cells. When Ryan asked why he had left at the beginning, Jim lied, saying he needed a lunch break. A strong earthquake shook the entire stomach. A giant pylori dragon emerged from the depths of the acid. The chief stomach cell informed Ryan and Jim that the dragon was behind the recent attacks on the stomach. It could survive in the stomach by using an enzyme called urease. This enzyme created a force field to protect it from the stomach acid's effects. Lesia and the other white blood cells arrived to eliminate the enemy. However, their weapons were completely ineffective against the dragon. Ryan and Jim continued their mission to supply oxygen to the stomach cells. But the stomach acid spraying from the ground scarred Ryan's leg. Nevertheless, he was determined to complete the mission and continued to move, limping. The dragon slammed into the stomach lining. The chief stomach cell urged Ryan and Jim to escape as the ground beneath them was about to collapse. They ran as fast as they could. However, Ryan sprained his ankle and fell to the ground, unable to continue. As he was about to slide into the acid pit, Jim turned back and pulled him out. Taking his place and sacrificing himself, Ryan could not believe Jim had plunged into the stomach acid. He tried to follow, but the chief stomach cell held him back. He scolded him for letting emotions override reason. Ryan shed tears as he reminisced about the joyful times with Jim. He was in such pain that he screamed, but there was no one there to comfort him. The final dragon was defeated by a mechanical war machine named clarithromycin, and all the cells in the stomach rejoiced. However, the stomach cell community knew that as long as the host continued this cowardly lifestyle, the threat was far from over. Days passed, and Ryan's heart was heavy with guilt. He tried to leave the bed, blaming himself for Jim's death. In the city, a nameless giant crystal suddenly appeared. White blood cells and macrophages quickly stepped in to destroy the crystal, but none of their attacks could even dent it. Realizing the challenge before them, the brain cell leader called for a strong defensive tactic known as Formation 1. The white blood cells were armed, and they launched a major attack on the crystal. Yet, even their ultimate strike could not bring it down. Witnessing this, all the cells began to flee to safety amidst the chaos. Ryan accidentally met a girl who asked him about Jim. She advised him to take care of the young man because Jim had always admired and respected him. Overwhelmed by everything happening, Ryan decided to rest and stopped at the spleen, where dysfunctional red blood cells were filtered out and unnecessary substances were removed under the supervision of a high-ranking cell named Jackie. Ryan slowly approached the filtration chamber and begged Jackie to release him, feeling he had no reason to live anymore. Instead of fulfilling his wish, Jackie punished Ryan for his irrational reasoning and urged him to work harder until he fulfilled the true purpose of his life. Meanwhile, despite the relentless efforts of the white blood cells, the giant crystal could not be destroyed. The ongoing battle caused significant damage to the city, leading to widespread devastation. This forced the brain cells to devise a different strategy. The main brain cells discovered that the giant crystal was not an invader from outside but rather a buildup of uric acid that the body could no longer tolerate. Ryan wants to cause further harm to the body with the intention of teaching a lesson to the host. And he calls on other cells to join him despite Lesia's efforts to advise against it. Ryan continues to punch the wall in anger, and Lesia rushes over to hug him tightly, begging him not to destroy the body that their dearest friend had sacrificed for. Her words resonate with Ryan, and he kneels down, crying. Amidst the chaos, a suppressive drug called colchicine puts the white blood cells to sleep, preventing further damage in the city. However, the brain cells believe that if the host's unhealthy habits persist, their lives will become much worse. The next day, all the red blood cells gather in the heart to carry out their daily tasks. 2 senior red blood cells complain about the clogged blood vessels, wondering if the heart will stop beating if this condition worsens. Brown hair cells inquire about Ryan, but their superiors don't know where he is and assume he won't return. However, when he appears and nods in greeting, they start worrying about him. The superiors are delighted by his return and welcome him warmly. Together with Seth, they venture into the abdomen. Upon arrival, all they see is a scorching, desolate pit. Seth struggles, as no cell can endure such harsh conditions. But Ryan informs him that its condition has improved significantly since his last visit, and he reminisces about his friend's death. Suddenly, the chief cell demands they hurry. Seth tries to introduce himself, but the chief cell silences him. Ryan explains that the chief cell dislikes remembering others' names, yet he's surprised when the department head suddenly calls him by name and instructs him to continue working diligently. On their way to the heart, they encounter numerous rocks, and Ryan wonders what would happen if the main artery of the heart became blocked as they move through the blood vessels. They spot some crushed red blood cells beneath the rocks, but the little cells arrive and clear the way, creating a small gap for the red blood cells to pass through. However, the walls begin to collapse, trapping them inside. Realizing the urgency, Ryan instructs Seth to find any available oxygen containers, and they rush to supply oxygen to the heart. Meanwhile, other cells began to panic as the oxygen level rapidly decreased. In the midst of chaos, a figure appeared on the screen demanding their urgent attention. He thanked everyone for their hard work. Then, he delivered the sad news that the film was about to end because the heart's main circuit had shut down. Realizing that the cells had endured the host's reckless living through countless gasps for life, he announced that the last straw had broken the camel's back, and they could no longer support this young man. Everyone was stunned by this announcement and demanded an explanation. They began to throw stones at the screen, like the online community throwing stones at Tran Ton. However, the old man could only bow his head in apology, unable to do anything more. Eventually, the heart stopped beating, and the red blood cells could no longer transport oxygen in time, but Ryan continued to search for oxygen. Lesia rushed outside to find Ryan, but before she could ask for his whereabouts, the lights suddenly went out. The brain cells confirmed it was a heart attack. This meant that everyone had to share the tragedy with the host. The entire body lost all power, but Ryan refused to give up. As everyone awaited the body's fate, it suddenly began to shake, and a flicker of light started to blink. Ryan realized the body was trying to revive itself. He ordered all the red blood cells to be ready to supply oxygen once the heart was restored, but Seth tried to convince him not to do so. A veteran red blood cell told him it was pointless and advised him to give up, but he was determined to work until the end. He shouted with his heart, and the heart responded by beating even brighter. Seeing the light radiate, everyone gradually whispered a hopeful prayer from the depths of their hearts. The heartbeat became much faster, and with a flash, the body was revived. Meanwhile, the red blood cells in the circulatory system worked vigorously to release the pathway. Just then, a mysterious worm sneaked in and used a flying ball to push aside the rocks, clearing the way for them. They were now able to deliver oxygen to Ryan through other red blood cells, transporting it to all cells in the body. The brain cells commander thanked Ryan for his efforts. Ryan also handed an oxygen tank to the elderly lady who was all alone, and she cried, thanking Ryan for always remembering her. As the light gradually returned to the city, he reminisced about all the memories he had during the difficult times of survival, mourning the loss of his close friend. The city suddenly became quiet, as if nothing had happened, and the cells resumed their normal activities. While passing by a train, Ryan interrupted Lesia's battle with a giant monster and invited her for a walk. They commented on how much their bodies had improved. Lesia praised him for his diligence and remarkable progress. Upon hearing her words, he decided to confess his feelings to her. Lesia blushed, almost turning from white blood cells to red blood cells. Just then, the walls cracked as they were pierced by a strange tube. Lesia ordered everyone to run, but they were all pulled away by the tube's mysterious power. Ryan held Lesia's hand, but she asked him to let go to avoid being sucked in. Unfortunately, it was too late. He was struck unconscious by an oxygen tank and pulled into the vortex. Ryan woke up inside the arteries, in the body of another being. It was filled with monsters and invading bacteria. He discovered that the new body was also a dark environment, and he realized that a horrifying past was about to catch up with him, a fantastic, mind-blowing ending. The video ends here. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel to support me and motivate me to create even better videos. Thank you all very much.